before the trip, everyone's involved in school and sports, and Jenny and I were involved in our own careers, and everyone's kind of on their own track to an extent. So on that trip, all that structure and things went away, and it was just the four of us out there trying to figure things out day to day. And so I think we grew closer together as a family as a result of the trip.
Alistair and Jenny Campbell made a swift decision in early 2015. After a single inspired dinner conversation, they decided to quit their senior level jobs in advertising to take their kids on a 1-year sabbatical around the world. Their idea was, why wait until retirement for this kind of experience? Less than 6 months later, they were on the road. They traveled to 24 countries on 4 continents, staying in Airbnbs all along the way. What's great about the end of their story is that there's a twist. Instead of returning home to Portland, Oregon, they decided to keep their life interesting and moved to a new city, Los Angeles, California, where they still live. In this interview, Jenny and Alistair share tons of practical advice for other families thinking of taking similar adventures. They talk about budgeting, homeschooling, visas, vaccinations, and how soccer jerseys are as good for starting conversations as puppies and babies. They also talk about the impact this experience had on them as a family and as individuals. This is Leap Like Me, and I'm your host, Lisa Hawashi. This show is about the leaps people take to make the most of this amazing life. Hello, Alistair and Jenny. Welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you, Lisa?
Doing great. Thanks for being on.
Thanks. It's great to be talking to you.
You guys are a dual career couple, and I think that's an interesting part of your sabbatical story. So to get started, I wanted to hear you guys give a brief introduction about you and your work and your family.
Okay. You want me to kick off? All right. Let's see. I'm in marketing. My current job right now is I am the CMO of Tinder, which is a dating app. Before then, I ran an ad agency at 72 and Sunny here in LA. And before that, I was at Nike for 7 years, working in marketing as well.
Yeah, I work in advertising and marketing, and Jenny and I actually met working in an agency in Portland, Oregon together. And so sort of followed that career path. And we have 2 kids who are now 13 and 11.
And where did the sabbatical inspiration come from for you guys?
I think it came largely from my parents, who 5 years ago retired in Seattle and sold their home and kind of embarked on a non-traditional retirement and just started traveling and staying principally in Europe and staying in lots of Airbnbs. And, we'd get sort of reports back from them of all the fabulous places they were going. And they sounded so fantastic. And we were
jealous.
We were really jealous.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so one night, I think we were sitting at dinner and talking about it and just saying, oh gosh, wouldn't that be fun to do that when we retire? And then we had this just kind of epiphany that, wait, maybe we don't need to wait another 20 years to do this.
It felt like so long. Yeah.
And would there be a way to do this now and take sort of a break from careers and go out and see the world and have this experience now versus, waiting till we retired at a traditional age?
I think we were also too. We really wanted to do it with our kids. And our kids were 8 and 10 at the time. And we were worried that if we waited too much longer, they wouldn't want to go because they would be teenagers and be really entrenched, or that it would just be harder to pull them out of school. And so all these factors, I think we started calling it Project Halftime, which is like halftime in our life, halftime in our career. And it just felt like the right moment.
And how was that decision-making process for you guys as a couple? Was it a series of conversations or one particular moment?
Gosh, I'm almost embarrassed to say it like this. I feel like we landed on it in that dinner, and we're so like all of a sudden it clicked with us that we could do it, that we probably quit our jobs within a month to 6 weeks of that conversation. It took a little bit of time just to make sure we could actually afford it, right? Because just all the even just figuring out what it might cost was a whole exercise, which we can talk about. But I feel like the decision itself, we felt so solid about early on that it didn't take a lot of convincing of ourselves that this felt like the right thing to do.
Yeah, I think we're really lucky that we're both in sync on that. And
Yeah.
as soon as it was out on the table, we both just sort of locked in, and it sounded so exciting
Yeah.
and so fun. And that we were both really, it sounded awesome to both of us. And then from there, it was just a process of, putting the pieces in place. Like, could we really do this?
That's right.
Um, and that part went pretty quickly. So as soon as we kind of hatched the idea, it felt like we're both pretty committed to making it happen.
But Al, you are so right. I think we've talked to several couples after this and families, and not all of them, like one the couple will want to do it and not the other. And we were really lucky that we were really aligned that way.
What were a couple of those very first factors that you guys looked at to see if this was feasible?
We tried to just figure out what we thought it would cost. So we had a good resource in Alistair's parents who'd been doing it for a while to ask them what their daily budget was, how much they were spending on Airbnbs. To be able to look at that, we started kind of costing out flights and trying to figure out just the bare bones of what we might want to do. And then we started, I think, just looking at as well, like what it would take if we rent our place? Would we have to sell it? Just like what kind of actually like liquid assets we had to be able to apply to it. And then I think the third and potentially the more important part, we were just trying to figure out our jobs, just figuring out if we were to quit our jobs, could we take a sabbatical versus quit? What would happen if we quit? Could we ever get a job again? Those were all the conversations that we had.
And so what did you guys eventually decide about your careers?
Well, it was a scary leap, wouldn't you say, Al?
Yes.
We both had pretty solid careers. I was at Nike at the time, and Alistair was running an ad agency in Portland. And it was scary, the thought of leaving a good job in your prime earning years. All the fears came through of just will being gone and out of the market make you less marketable when you come back into it? Will if we were coming back into Portland's such a small market that there's only so many really senior level jobs there that we were just worried about what reentry might look like.
I'd say the more we talk to, current colleagues, you just saw for many of them the light flicker in their eyes when you described this
true.
idea.
Yeah.
And everyone was, I don't know, we kind of got the sense that people are saying, go for it, do it.
Do it for us.
Do it if you can. And I think another sort of thought that we had was, if we went and traveled for a year, that will be, a long time for us. We'll get that a year's worth of really cool experience. But for people that are sort of heads down working, our absence would be almost just a blink of an eye.
Yeah.
I mean, the world will keep turning without us being there. If we come knocking on the door a year from now and ask for our old jobs back, that's a possibility. Or, maybe we'll decide to do something new.
But we didn't know that in the beginning. I think that was part of the fear of just not, we know that now, but I don't know that we knew it in the beginning.
I think it's such a good point, the idea of the year being a lot in your own personal lives, but maybe not so much in the lifetime of a company. Because when I took my own sabbatical, they didn't even refill my position for a year. So I really didn't have to worry about leaving that particular position if I had really wanted to come back to it.
That's so true.
What were some of the other fears or initial concerns that you guys had?
We didn't exactly know how much it would cost. And we weren't sure. We didn't know what we didn't know, basically. So I think it's a pretty odd sensation when you're used to earning and seeing your monthly income come in each month to all of a sudden be in a situation where the only way you see your bank account is to go slowly down. I think, and we wanted to make sure that we could make it last for a full year. And I think we weren't quite sure if we had planned enough.
The other thing that comes to mind is education of the kids.
Oh, totally.
And
Yes.
I think we were concerned about taking them out of school for a year. They would both end up missing their fifth and third grade years. And we are not teachers. We don't really know anything about homeschool.
Yeah.
And just to put it bluntly, we didn't want to set them back academically.
And how did you guys deal with that question?
We dealt with it kind of the way we dealt with all of it. You just get in and kind of figure it out. We went and met with the kids' teachers and our principal at the school. We looked at the curriculum for the following year. We asked their opinion. And we also looked into just legalities of homeschooling, which in Oregon is actually not very hard, shockingly not hard at all. It was interesting talking to the principal and the teachers. They were very encouraging, but they also were like, listen, you guys could probably do what we do in one day in like 1 to 2 hours, just because we have so much management of 30 kids trying to herd them around the school and different levels of teaching. That one-on-one time would actually be pretty concise. And we just kind of boned up on it. We bought a lot of books. We downloaded Khan Academy. We just kind of did it.
So you guys were moving really fast, right? From the point of decision to when you guys actually left. How much time was that?
We had that dinner in March, maybe, and then we left in August.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, March to August.
What influenced the timing on that? Was it the school year?
There was definitely a little bit of the school year. Alistair definitely needed to finish up some things with his work, so that kind of led us into August.
And we knew we wanted to start the trip in Europe for some other family reasons, to get to cross over with some other family that would be traveling in Europe. And as a general principle, a lot of our travel planning revolved around following the sun and trying to be in countries and climates when the weather is warm instead of being cold. There's a lot of reasons for that. One is we like warm weather.
We like it, yeah.
But just on a practical level, we thought, boy, this is going to be a hard trip if we have to pack loads and loads of cold weather gear and rain parkas and hats. We're going to need ginormous suitcases. And if we can be in places where the weather's warm, we can have a much lighter footprint.
And also, we ended up finding, we didn't know this when we planned it, but we spent a whole lot less money in warm locations than cold, just because in warm locations, there's so many free things to do. You can hang out in a park, you can walk around, you can eat an ice cream sitting on a bench. Whereas when it's cold and rainy, you pay for museum entries, or you have to kind of go into a restaurant where you have to spend money, or all those things to get shelter. Makes it more expensive in cold weather places.
That's a great point. As you guys dialed down into the last few weeks before your trip, what were some of the most difficult planning or logistics?
Oh my gosh, packing up the house. I threw my back out packing up the house. Just trying to get that packed up, and we had a renter coming in and figuring out all the logistics of that. I thought was pretty challenging.
Yeah, we had made the decision to rent our house while we were traveling as an income stream, which turned out to be a great decision. But there were loads and loads of, akin to when you decide to move somewhere, a million different decisions about what to put into storage, what to leave in the house for the renters, and just trying to be smart. What documents might we need access to on the road? And so it felt like a really long list of these, logistical questions regarding our belongings and our stuff and how to manage that in a good way while we were traveling. That was the biggest pain in the butt.
It's true.
Yeah. I remember that as a real slog. I mean, even just for a single person, I had a really daunting to-do list that was hard to get through.
And no one understands it. When you're telling your friends about it, you just sound like such a complainer if you say that how hard it is, because everyone's like, oh, you're doing this great trip. Why in the world? So you can't really complain about it either, but it is. It definitely took a lot of time. I think the other thing that was hard for us to figure out as well was just things like health insurance, because again, we made the decision to quit our jobs, which meant that we needed to get our own health insurance. And so we were trying to figure out international health insurance. We had never had to figure out before. So that felt kind of daunting and took a lot of research. And then just all the stuff around just all your medical things, trying to get that kind of all buttoned up. Visas. Which countries do you need visas in that you're going to need the American embassy for that you want to take care of now? Like all those things just added to the list.
Yeah, it's a big to-do list for sure. And I remember a lot of customer service phone calls that weren't so pleasant either.
I know, totally.
What was your guys' skeleton plan for your year?
We knew we wanted to follow the sun, be in warm weather places. We also, I think, just felt like we wanted to cover a lot of ground and see a lot of the world. Jenny and I have been fortunate to travel quite a bit before the sabbatical, but the kids really hadn't been international. I've been outside the country that much. So we kind of divided the year into four chunks and said that we'd spend 3 to 4 months in four continents: Europe, Asia, Australia, New Zealand, and South America. That was the overall skeleton. And then, homeschool and figuring out kind of continuing education for the kids was an important factor for us. So we tried to construct our stops and build in time to do homeschool. And so that meant we tried to dedicate 4 days out of every 7 from 9 to noon to do homeschool. And so that kind of became the backbone of how we would stay in most of the places. We'd usually go for about a week to some location and try to spend at least 4 days in the mornings doing homeschool, and then that left afternoons to do other stuff, and then a couple days that were totally free to just go out and explore.
And what were your first few days or even weeks on the road like?
Gosh, let's see. We started in France and we met up with Al's family, who was also on the road. So we kicked off really it felt like vacation, because we were with family in a cute little French coastal town. I would say it took us almost a month to click into the fact that we were actually traveling for a year versus just on some great European vacation. And I think it probably hit me first once we got to Amsterdam and we were buying groceries for the place, and was having trouble getting our groceries back to the apartment on our bikes. And all of a sudden it felt less like vacation travel and more like living somewhere else where you didn't quite know exactly where you're going on things. I don't know if you would agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, we're planners. So we had a planned budget and, a planned approach. And that's all well and good till you get out in the field and then you have to make some adjustments. So we definitely, for the first 4 or 5 weeks, I think we're figuring out what worked, what didn't work, and sort of fine tuning our planning along the way.
Like one of the things we found that didn't work was we got to Munich, I think, which was our third city, France, then Amsterdam, then Munich. And we just had a horrible Airbnb. And I was super depressed. It was like over a strip club in a horrible part of town. And I was just like, what are we doing? This is the most depressing place ever. And we realized what was really important to us on this trip was making sure that we had a really great place, a home base, an apartment to be in, a house to be in. Because we were spending a week there, we were homeschooling, we were in the house a lot. It's different than when you're traveling and you're just out constantly sightseeing. Like you're actually trying to live in this city. And we had to adjust our budget. We moved some things around so that we could spend more money on housing. But it probably took us a couple times to figure that was really important.
And how were your kids' reactions? I kind of feel like we need to backpedal and go back to when you guys first talked about the idea with them. And then also, like, in these first few weeks, how did you see their adjustment?
Yeah, we didn't really know how they were going to react when we told them. And yes, they were 10 and 8 at the time. So when we sort of shared the plan, they were really enthusiastic about it. And I think primarily the first thing they would probably tell you was, wow, we don't have to go to school for a whole year. That's going to be fantastic. I honestly think that was their sort of first and overriding thought.
Yes. Yeah, I think if we had waited even 2 more years, it would have been a harder conversation. Honestly, I think the timing of when we did this was really perfect in that regard, and that they weren't super entrenched. We at that point too, we were planning to come back to Portland. So for them, it was not about saying goodbye forever to their friends, for any of us, so there wasn't necessarily that trauma to deal with.
And then once you guys got on the road, what was it like to be together as a family so much of the time?
It was amazing in all the ways that you would imagine it to be amazing. Like, I still think it's such a defining time in our lives as a family. We are so incredibly tight as a unit coming out of it. But there were lots of hard things. I mean, teaching your kids and homeschooling your kids is easier than you might think, and then it's more difficult in certain areas, and that the patience required to teach your own kids every day when you're not teachers, especially, is tricky. And you're constantly together. You're there 24 hours a day. So figuring out how to give each other personal space within the day was not hard for Al and I. We've been married a long time. We knew how to do that. But like kids don't quite know what that means. And sometimes you just need 30 minutes to not talk to someone and sit in the corner and read your book. And that took a little bit of getting used to how we do that.
And you mentioned that you adjusted your budget to give yourself a little bit more of comfort in where you stayed. What else was different or that you had to adjust once you were on the road, according to your expectations or your plan?
We were pretty strict on our budgeting, and that wasn't just for fun. That's because there was a limited amount of money. If we went way over our budget, we would have to end the trip early and go back to work. And so, one of the things that we set for ourselves was $100 a day, essentially like a per diem, and that needed to cover all of our food and entertainment. And if you're doing things like going to museums, that can get eaten up really quickly. And so we had to make, I think, decisions about the kinds of activities that we did. And actually, it was pretty cool because we brought the kids into that as well. And kind of together, we would plan and sort of allocate how we wanted to spend that day's $100.
Or you tried to save some of it because you knew another day was going to be expensive. I will say, too, we've heard so many people who have done it for cheaper, and I think there's definitely ways to do it for cheaper. Like when you say it out loud, actually, $100 sounds like a lot. For a family of 4 with food, with all that, it was tougher than you think, with the especially in Europe and especially in Australia and New Zealand. Asia, no problem at all. If you really wanted to do this trip on a budget, just go to Asia and stay there. And you could do it for a third, probably, of what we budgeted for the whole year. But the fact that we were traveling so much, which required a lot of transportation costs, and then we really wanted to stay in Airbnbs because we needed that kitchen and all that kind of stuff, it definitely upped how much we needed each day.
One thing I'll add on, I think we went through a shift from understanding that we were on this trip and we were not on vacation.
Yeah.
The way, historically we tended to treat vacations, they were kind of splurges.
Yeah.
And so we quickly found out that we couldn't kind of treat the whole year like we would a 1-week vacation somewhere. Right. And, make financial decisions like we would on a vacation. We had to be much more frugal.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to hear briefly just what was one place that you were surprised by or you just loved unexpectedly?
I think our whole family absolutely loved Japan. And we probably could have spent so much. We spent almost 3 weeks there. We could have spent more. It was such a wonderful culture. We loved the cities. We liked Tokyo. We liked the countryside, just the design of it, the food of it, the people. We just had such a really amazing time there. I'd been to Japan once for work, but work is just a different beast. This was actually like living and experiencing it, and we were all delighted.
I would say Malaysia was a real surprise as well. Feels like it's kind of an under the radar place, but really beautiful and lots of very different kinds of terrain, but a really interesting cultural and food place. We learned that a lot of interesting sort of food traditions have all kind of gone into a big melting pot in Malaysia in terms of Indian and various sort of Asian food histories. And so we had a blast in Malaysia.
And for you guys, I would love to hear your responses to both of these. But if you were to say, like, what was your biggest intention for taking this time off, what was it for you?
I'll speak for myself on this. I think making sure that we had this moment with our kids at the age that they were to really do something special and truly have time just to be together without distractions was a big factor in us not waiting to do this. We really wanted to do it as a foursome. And so the intentionality of just having a year with just us felt really good.
I would add on, I think particularly for our kids, growing up in Portland, Oregon, which is a wonderful place and a wonderful community, but also small and, not the most diverse place in the world. I think we wanted to give the kids an opportunity to broaden their horizons and see that there's lots of other folks in the world. There's lots of other ways people are living. And if we could do that at a young age, then hopefully that's something that would stick with them throughout the rest of their lives, and they would kind of grow as people with kind of a broader perspective on the world.
Shifting a bit more toward the end of your guys' trip, when did you guys start thinking about what was next?
Probably sooner than we had anticipated. About halfway through, I had been contacted by a couple headhunters about just jobs back in the States. And my point of view in general is that you always just have a conversation, just you don't shut those things down. But there were a couple pretty amazing opportunities that came up that just came up earlier than we had anticipated. And so that I think probably pulled us back into thinking about what's ahead sooner than we had imagined.
Yeah, our original game plan, I think we left in August and we said we wouldn't start thinking and planning around the job stuff until like March or April.
April, yeah,
So
totally.
sort of 3/4 of the way through. And that was intentional because we didn't want to have to be thinking about that and, networking and doing all that stuff. So it kind of happened a little sooner just by circumstance, but that was the game plan.
And how did you guys make the decision about what to do next?
We were talking about this last night. When you start traveling, like again, we had all intentions of going back to Portland. I really liked my job at Nike. And again, Alistair was a part owner of an agency. It felt like a natural thing. There's nothing broken with Portland. We really like it. Once you start traveling, though, you find yourself getting unstuck mentally, physically. Like you just have less things pulling you into a certain city. And I would say about maybe 5 months in, we started getting into cities that we would like, and we would start having these conversations like, oh, what would it be like to live here? And oh, what kind of jobs do you think would be here? And we hadn't been doing that until that point. And I think when some of those opportunities got presented to us, at some point in the year, it seemed a lot easier to entertain them because we weren't so like locked into having to go back to Portland. And so we started really thinking about them more around the job opportunity versus any other kind of conversation.
And also, I think we'd the spine of our trip had been following the sun and being in warm weather places. And after doing that for a year, I think we really loved that. And that was nice. So that was not the driving factor, but an additional factor in where we ended up living, which is Los Angeles, where the weather's nice every day. So I don't think that's by accident. Yeah, that was something that sounded more attractive over time.
And how did you guys prepare both yourselves and your kids for the transition back to US life and also to a new city?
It was not that hard. It's interesting. I'm surprised how unhard it was. Let's see. Lucy was starting when we came back here. Was starting middle school, which I was so nervous for her about having gone from a year of homeschool into a middle school, which is a hard time anyway. And I remember her saying to me, like, "Mom, as long as I can talk the language, I'm not scared or something. Or I'm not worried." And that was such a big aha for me of like, oh my gosh, these kids have kind of had this year of having to be uncomfortable and live in really challenging environments, and they knew they could survive that. And all of a sudden, middle school was nothing compared to that. And then, in some ways, having been a year on the road, like it felt great to have a house again and to have our things. And so that transition back felt exciting versus daunting.
And what were some of the changes that you guys saw in your kids over the course of that year and this experience?
I'd say the kids came back with a higher degree of self-confidence,
Hmm.
and that's not something that we forecast or anticipated. But as a family, the four of us had traveled in all kinds of situations and often been in uncomfortable situations or situations where we didn't know how to catch the bus or how to order ramen. And so we went through a lot of that together. And I think just slowly but surely, the kids just developed, they sat up a little straighter, a little bit more confident. At the end of the trip, our daughter said, she learned to be comfortable in uncomfortable situations.
Yeah. I think too, like They are very comfortable having adult conversations, and I don't know if that's just because of their age right now, or they had a year of just hanging out with grown-ups, and so they're really interesting to talk to now. They've got interesting things to say, and they're very confident in that regard. And we ended up talking about so many more things as a family than we would have in Portland. Like, I was raised in the South, and you weren't supposed to talk about money, and politics were something that we hadn't really talked about with our kids, not for any reason, just they were kind of young and we hadn't done it. And when you're on the road together, you talk about everything and you make decisions as a family. Even when I was thinking about taking this job back in LA, I would have probably before Al and I would have agreed, taken the job and then told the kids. But the kids were kind of part of the decision. Do we want to live in LA? And that was a new behavior that I think came out of the trip with our kids.
And how about for you guys personally as individuals? What changes did you notice?
I felt very confident at work when I came back, mainly because I had just been on a year where I knew that I could live with a whole lot less than what I currently had. And so when I went into this new role, I was excited for it, but I felt like, well, if it doesn't work out, that's fine. I'll figure out something else because I know that I can. And that was a pretty amazing feeling.
I feel like we just grew together as a family unit because of that experience, that shared experience. When we were before the trip, everyone's involved in school and sports, and Jenny and I were involved in our own careers, and everyone's kind of on their own track to an extent. So on that trip, we all, all that structure and things went away, and it was just the four of us out there trying to figure things out day to day. And so I think we grew closer together as a family as a result of the trip.
To close up our conversation, I wanted to ask you guys 3 questions. So, the first question is, what do you wish you had known before you took your leap?
I think for myself, a really practical thing is I wish that I had taken care of all vaccinations and gotten all the travel medication lined up before we left. I was so overwhelmed with the list of things we had to do that I just didn't deal with it when I was still on insurance at Nike. Or we didn't know enough about our itinerary to exactly know what to do. But trying to do that on the road ended up being expensive, number one. And number two, it was harder to do. We ended up spending more time trying to figure that out, especially as we went into Asia where we needed more of that. And I so wish I'd just done that before we left.
Yeah, I have another practical one, which is arranging visas for those sort of countries where you need them before you leave. It was infinitely harder to do that while you're on the road because oftentimes you have to send your passport in to get that stamped. And if you're traveling, you can't not have your passport for a month. That's really inconvenient. So getting all those things squared away before you leave was something I'd recommend for people to do.
Right. What was the most unexpected thing that came from your leap?
One thing for us is our son is a huge soccer fan, and he and Al would go to soccer games all around the globe, and he loved getting soccer jerseys. So any kind of local club he would love to get. That was always like he didn't really want anything else other than just soccer jerseys. And soccer jerseys are this amazing conversation starter. They're like puppies or babies. We got to more people because of what jersey Spencer was wearing, because someone inevitably would be a fan of it, especially if it was a local club, and start up a conversation. Had I known that, we would have gotten them 20 of them and just put them out into the wild to help us meet people on the way. But as it was, it kind of happened naturally.
That's great. That is something that most people are going to have an opinion about.
Exactly.
Unexpected for me was the budgeting and just the awareness, bringing the kids into those conversations, and as a family unit, making decisions about how and where we wanted to spend our money. That's not something that I feel like before the trip in Portland the kids really had a strong role in, but on the road we definitely everyone was really involved in those decisions, and I think at the end of the day the kids walked away with a sense of how much things cost, which is a great thing for kids to know.
Yeah, and decision making around limited resources when you have a finite amount of money.
Absolutely.
For someone who's thinking about doing something similar, what's one piece of advice you'd give them?
I think if you can truly not think about what's next, and really just allow yourself to be in the moment. And that is such a cliche, and it's hard to do. It really is hard not to think ahead or think about what happens when you get back. I think giving yourself like, I am not going to think about this for 9 months. I am intentionally taking this time to not think about my job or what's next, and just carving that out. If you leave it murky, I think it's really easy to let your mind wander into it and distract you from what you're doing.
And what do you think the real benefit is there, Jenny?
I think it's kind of like going on vacation and not looking at your phone all the time or checking your emails or doing social media. It's that really freeing up your brain to be bored at times, to be able to read a book without wondering what you're learning from it, but just read it for pure enjoyment. Like, it just, the freedom of it. We very rarely get that type of mental freedom in our lives. And it's a gift to be able to get that when you're traveling.
I would say to anyone contemplating it, if you're contemplating it, you can do it. Just go for it. Don't be bogged down by practical considerations. There's sort of a solution for almost everything, and there's lots of ways to do a trip like this. You can do it on a lower budget. Obviously, you can do it on a higher budget. You could do it for a limited amount of time. There's just so many variables that there's a way to do it for everyone. And so if you're thinking about it, if you're curious, just go for it.
Well, you guys, I want to thank you for your time. It's been great talking to you, and really enjoyed hearing about your story and your adventure with your family.
Oh, thank you back, Lisa. It was really fun to chat.
Yeah, it's a really fun conversation, fun to bring up the memories of the trip and to chat about it.
So if people want to know a little bit more about your trip or some of your advice, what next step can they take?
Well, we didn't do a blog because I think a blog for us felt like work. We didn't want to have anything to do with work. We kept our own personal notes, obviously. But I did get excited about midway into the trip. I wrote a few articles on medium.com about things that I had learned, mainly because I just wanted to remember them for myself and to be able to help anyone else who wanted to do it. And so if you look under my profile on medium.com, Jenny.Campbell007, there's an article in there on how to budget for a trip like this, how we did homeschool. There's an article on just like the 5 essential travel things that we were surprised that we needed, and we hadn't seen that on a list before. So there might be some practical things to be able to pull up from there.
Terrific. Okay, we'll include the links to those in the show notes.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
Thanks again. That's it for today's show. Thank you for listening. I hope you got as much out of it as I did. I really admire the Campbells for the open-ended way that they left their trip and tried something new at the end, and also their super practical approach to making their dream a reality. I definitely think sometimes about taking my family on a big sabbatical trip at some point in my life, so it's been inspiring and also really nice to get ideas for how to go about it. Don't forget to head over to my website, lisahawashi.com, to see photos of the Campbells on their trip, as well as to check out the link to Jenny's travel and planning tips. If you're enjoying this show, we would love it if you leave us a rating or review on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Share the show with friends or family who you think would get something out of it, and this will really help us grow our audience and reach more people. Thank you. Also, if you're thinking of taking your own leap or in the midst of one, we've got some more resources for you. Number 1, join the Leap Like Me community on Facebook. Support one another, share your stories, and ask me questions. 2, if you want more in-depth support, contact me about coaching. I'm happy to talk to you about it. I coach both individuals and groups of 2, couples and business partners, to clarify what they really want in life and work and really go after that. Visit lisahawashi.com or ping me at Lisa Hawashi on Facebook or Instagram. In the meantime, have a great week, and thanks for listening to Leap Like Me.